Welcome back to the channel, my male brothers, where we are pushing back the curse one masculine man at a time. My name is Dr. John Streffling. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, so not trying to pretend to be a medical doctor. However, I have a really interesting study that you're going to need to know about, especially if you practice fasting. But even if you don't, what this is going to do is demonstrate my two principles, especially one of them being the hormone teeter-totter. If you remember that from the other video, which I'll put up here. So if you haven't watched that video, then I would suggest watching that first and then come back here. But this is a really interesting study and something that you need to know if you are trying to raise your testosterone, your libido, your sperm count, any of those things. If you are just looking for even the benefits of increased energy, drive, creativity, decision making that comes from higher testosterone, then you're going to want to pay attention. Okay, let's get into it. This study is called Testicular-Induced Corticosterone Synthesis in Male Rats Under Fasting Stress. So right off the bat, we'll point out this corticosterone is the rat equivalent of cortisone in humans. All right, so let's jump into this study. So we're going to look at some of the overview of the study, and then we'll look at the results. So first, this was a little more longer term fasting. This was a 4-day fast in male rats. And we're going to take a look at they're showing some of those results, but we're going to jump into this. First of all, you want to know this piece, though. They do mention blood levels versus tissue levels. And this is important because sometimes, or a lot of times, blood labs aren't going to give you the big and full picture. A lot of these hormonal issues can be hiding in the tissues. So that's true of estrogen, for example. Estrogen can be very low or look very low in the blood. However, it can be extremely high in the tissues. And one little trick, one way you would know that perhaps even through a lab result, is to look at the prolactin levels. So those are going to be high if your estrogen is hiding in the tissues, even if its prolactin is on the higher end. Could be possible. All right, so let's look at what they found in these male rats after doing a 4-day fast. These now are the results of the blood levels. Okay, so number one, this is not good. Their testes shrink. That is a scary outcome already. Smaller gonads off the bat. Okay, not good. Let me point out too, in green and red, I have in here two colors, the green and red, and that is referring back to this. This is our hormone teeter-totter. I should have revisited right away. This is the androgenic side, the catabolic side, stress side. And these, as a reminder, are the androgenic, the building hormones, the kind of hormones that only come around in peacetime when your body is signaling and perceiving that it's in a peacetime state. All right, so everything in green is going to be referring to those androgenic hormones. This is what's happening there. So testes fits into that. That androgenic group, weight decreased. Progesterone decreased by 50% of the control group. The control group was just the group that didn't fast, just ate normally. And now check this out. Testosterone, even in the blood, decreased by 98%. I mean, y'all, that's almost gone. Testosterone in 4 days is almost completely gone. Okay, now this is interesting. Check this out. There was no change in the blood cortisol, basically. So And you see that just is referring to cortisol, the equivalent of cortisol in humans. So it looked like cortisol was the same. So it kind of looks like our little teeter-totter is wrong. These definitely decreased significantly. And then, so the question is, did these just kind of stay the same? Is our teeter-totter incorrect? Well, let's dive in a little deeper. So next, those were blood level findings. We're going to go into the tissues. So specifically into the testes. So inside the testes, what did they find? These versions of the stress hormones increased 3x and 18x. 3x and 18x for those stress hormones. So we were wrong about these. This didn't show up as high in the blood, but it definitely showed up as high in the tissues. So what's going on there? The stress hormones are in the tissues, not in the blood. Why? Because this is what these catabolic hormones generally do. They break down, and they don't break down blood or water, they break down tissues. And so these rats had smaller testes because they were being broken down by the stress hormones in the testes. Okay, what about testosterone? How did that do in the tissues? Not just in the blood, but in the tissues. That decreased by 95%. Again, nearly gone. How about the other anabolic hormones? These guys here, what happened to those? Those were nearly gone. Nearly gone. Interesting. The pregnenolone didn't change much, but their precursors and the enzymes, we'll see in a second, definitely decreased. And progesterone, DHT, which is the high testosterone version of testosterone. So enzymes with pregnenolone showed decrease. This is one of those androgens. Progesterone decreased. The enzymes that produce more, signal producing more cortisol increased. So those got boosted. Everything basically on the androgen side decreased. Okay, so some other interesting outcomes and things to think about, but what we're seeing here in the big picture is hopefully you're seeing the teeter-totter effect. As one increases, the other decreases. All right, and that definitely happened in this case of fasting. So this, by the way, is also important for sperm production, and that's in here too. So that's the Leydig cells in the testes. So it suppressed sperm production in there, and it impaired energy going to the testes. It's basically choking them out. And this is from, again, just a 4-day fast. Okay, so hopefully we're getting an idea of fasting also. Fasting being on this time, or this spectrum here. Remember this peacetime, wartime spectrum? This is where your body perceives it's at. Fasting is definitely a wartime signaling. And so when it's in a wartime signal, it's going to increase these catabolic stress hormones, which means decreasing all of these. And with those decrease, all the nice to haves, these peacetime outcomes, decrease. So things like your fertility, sperm production, libido, testosterone production, even things down to your high-level sports performance, your creativity, having good decision making, weighing risks well. Those are all peacetime activities, Not going to happen when you're doing things stressing your body like fasting, for example. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a good picture of the hormone teeter-totter. Now, someone's going to object and say, well, yes, that's a 4-day fast, but I intermittent fast and I skip breakfast, and that's not the same thing. Okay, good. I'm glad you asked. So I have one more to look at here. Now this study was really interesting because one of the authors, I think it was the PhD here, was a practicer of intermittent fasting, and he would suggest that to a lot of his patients, and he performed this study in hopes of showing the benefits. And what happened is he was surprised and actually showed quite the opposite. So let's look at this study. So here's the overview. It was 12 weeks long, so pretty short, as are almost all nutrition type studies. And they had 2 groups. The first one, this TRE, just refers to time restricted eating. And so they had an 8-hour eating window, and they skipped breakfast. Skipping breakfast. All right, I'll save my comments. The other group was a consistent meal timing, so they just ate at normal meal times and snacks. Oh yeah. All right, so comparing these 2 groups, let's check out their results. So first thing, weight loss was pretty close to the same. Even just a ½ pound more in the fasting group. So, oh, great. So that looks like a positive for intermittent fasting. Although these differences were not statistically different. Okay, so really not statistically different, tiny bit of difference, maybe in favor of the fasting group. Okay, now important question to ask after weight loss is, where did that weight come from? And that's why we have a DEXA scan. So that's an X-ray look at body composition, fat and muscle tissue. One of the best ways. There's arguments, but it is a very good way. You can't really argue that. It's a very good way of checking body tissues. And so here's where it gets interesting. So first one here, body fat mass didn't have a big significant difference. Maybe a little, just a tiny difference, but not statistically different. Now, when you look at the total lean mass, so lean mass is mostly referring to muscle tissue. Remember, TRE is the intermittent fasting group, showed a significant decrease in muscle loss as compared to the group that was just eating at regular intervals. And the difference was almost 2 pounds of muscle mass difference. The fasting group, again, lost muscle, about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds more muscle lost compared to the other group. The other group barely lost anything. The fasting group lost well over 2 pounds in total. Then they checked appendiculars referring to limbs versus trunk. So they looked at limbs versus the trunk to see if there was a difference. So in all 3 cases, the intermittent fasting group had a significant loss of muscle tissue in their arms and legs and in their trunk. Both of these were significantly different. In the trunk wasn't significantly different to the other control group. But big picture, more muscle lost in the intermittent fasting group. Okay, another interesting marker, how about blood pressure? There was no significant change in the blood pressure, the top number, systolic, in the fasting group, intermittent fasting group. There was a significant decrease in systolic blood pressure in the group that ate regularly, although this wasn't significant between the groups. So interesting, kind of like maybe better or equal to be eating regularly in that realm. And this one is really, really interesting. So they both groups had Oura rings, and they were tracking their daily movement and step counts. So we've got the intermittent fasting group that had significantly fewer numbers of daily movement and significantly lower steps per day, about 2,200 steps per day less as compared to the group that was eating on a regular basis. Okay, one last marker, sleep quality. So the non-fasting group, the normal intervals, just eating all day, they improved their sleep quality index, which is interesting. The fasting group had no change, no detriment. So let's take an overview. Here's an overview of the results. The intermittent fasting group, remember they had an 8-hour window, they skipped breakfast. They lost more muscle mass, significantly more muscle mass. They moved less. Their body taught them, pulled the reins back on how much they moved. They had no change in blood pressure or sleep quality necessarily. So it didn't affect those too much. They lost weight, but a good portion of it was lean mass, was muscle mass. Now, how about the other group? The group that just ate regularly and had snacks. Oh yeah. They maintained lean muscle mass. They kept their physical activity up, and they even improved both blood pressure numbers and sleep quality numbers. So hopefully you're seeing that fasting is in this wartime signaling to the body and the brain. It is a wartime whether it's long-term, 4 days in the first study, or whether it's intermittent in the day, even over 12 weeks. Remember, this was only over 12 weeks time. What if you extended that muscle mass loss out for 6 months and a year? How much muscle mass are you losing? How much are you losing in all those other areas? You're moving less. You're using less calories. Why? Because you're telling your body that you're in a wartime state. The other thing is we could go through other studies, and I just made a quick list here. These are other things associated specifically with intermittent fasting, perhaps caused by, associated with. So that depends on the study. But things like hair loss, risk of heart disease death, risk of early death, decrease in the androgens, remember the building hormones? So intermittent fasting is related to decreasing these. Why? Well, because when you don't have stored glycogen, you need cortisol along with some other stress hormones like glucagon and adrenaline. Here, these need to pump up so that they can take fat and turn it into energy, which is actually not a good thing. It's really when you do too much fat oxidation, that's really the precursor to things like diabetes and down that whole road. You don't want that. So this is why carbohydrates are muscle sparing. That's why good carbohydrates, I should caveat, is pro-metabolic, which means it's pro-testosterone, pro-libido, and all those good things. The other thing associated with intermittent fasting is an increase in aldosterone, which is a hormone that's related to high blood pressure. In another interesting study, I'll go over this one because this is really interesting. They showed that intermittent fasting actually preserved fat. Even if fat overall was being lost, it held on to visceral fat. And if you don't know what visceral fat is, that is the fat that is attached to your organs, the very dangerous type of fat that we don't want, that's constantly leaking fatty acids into the blood and is causing all kinds of probably these heart issues, death issues up here. I'm sure those are tied in together along with this, with blood pressure and that. And then the last point I kind of mentioned already about too much or excess fatty acid oxidation. Don't want that. Okay, so my big takeaways, what I want you to get is still these main principles. I just wanted to show you an example of how this looks in real life of this teeter-totter. And this teeter-totter bringing up or down these androgenic hormones versus this catabolic side is going to depend on this piece up here. If you want all of these things here, you have to signal peacetime to your brain and your body. And how do you do that? Good question. We'll hit that in another video. All right, men. Till next time, let's pump up that testosterone. Be wise. Don't do stupid things. Fasting is foolish if you're doing it specifically for trying to raise your testosterone or to lose weight. It's a foolish way to do it. Don't do it. Aim at your metabolism instead. Pump that up, make that stronger, do the things that lead to peacetime, and all of these things will come. All right, catch you on the next one.